Picture this. You are driving for hours across the United States late at night with nothing around except stretches of highway, truck stops, and exits you barely notice as you pass them. For most people, those roads are just part of the journey. But over time, investigators in several states started noticing something unsettling. Young women were being found near major interstates, often far from home, and in a number of those cases, the victims had red or urban hair. As more cases appeared, journalists and investigators began using a label that would stick for decades: the Redhead Murders. The problem is that name makes it sound far more certain than it actually is. It suggests one defined investigation, one offender, maybe even one clear trail of victims moving across the country. But when you look closely at the evidence, the picture becomes much less straightforward. There was never an official case file called the Redhead Murders. There was no confirmed victim count, and no point where investigators publicly concluded that all of these women were killed by the same person. Instead, what existed was a growing collection of unsolved cases that seemed similar enough to raise difficult questions, especially because the bodies kept appearing near highways across multiple states over a span of years. And eventually, those similarities became serious enough that officials from several states, along with the FBI, sat down together in Nashville in 1985 to compare the cases side by side. What makes this case difficult to talk about is that there was never one official investigation called the Redhead Murders, and there has never been a trial or a single indictment tying all of these cases together. No court has ever ruled that one person was responsible for all of these deaths. What investigators were dealing with instead was a loose collection of unsolved killings spread across multiple states, including Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. On paper, the similarities were hard to ignore. Over the late 1970s and into the early 1990s, young women, many of them described as having red or urban hair, were repeatedly being found near interstates, highways, and major roads. But that still didn't automatically make it one case. Different police departments were handling different investigations, often separated by hundreds of miles. Different families were searching for answers about their missing daughters, sisters, or loved ones, without necessarily knowing that their cases might later be discussed alongside others. And for years, investigators were left trying to work out whether these murders were genuinely connected, or whether separate crimes had gradually been grouped together because the similarities felt too unsettling to ignore. And really, that uncertainty sits at the center of this entire story. Because this is not the story of a serial killer who was neatly identified, arrested, and convicted. In many ways, it is a story about how patterns are created, how investigators try to make sense of incomplete evidence, and how some questions can stay unresolved for decades. What makes the Redhead Murders so difficult to pin down is that the story exists somewhere in the space between confirmed facts, investigative theory, and public perception. Part of what people are responding to is real. There were genuine unsolved murders across multiple states that shared unsettling similarities, but at the same time, the label itself gradually became larger and cleaner than the evidence ever really allowed it to be. And that's part of the reason this case has stayed alive for so long. People naturally try to make sense of patterns, especially when the alternative is accepting that multiple young women to disappear or turn up dead along major highways without anyone fully understanding why. Over time, investigators, journalists, and the public all started looking at these cases through the same lens, trying to work out whether they were isolated tragedies or fragments of something connected. By early 1985, that uncertainty had become serious enough that several law enforcement agencies decided they needed to compare what they had directly. Different departments were dealing with unsolved murders involving women with red or reddish hair, whose bodies had been found near interstates and major roads. Some victims had never been identified at all. Others were believed to have been hitchhiking or moving between states on their own. Each case was disturbing enough. Taken together, they started raising larger questions. So, on the 24th of April 1985, officials from Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania, along with agents from the FBI, met at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation headquarters in Nashville. For around 6 hours, they sat together, reviewing 8 unsolved homicide cases that appeared to share certain similarities, particularly the victims themselves, the proximity to highways, and the repeated appearance of red or urban hair in the case descriptions. And this really becomes one of the key turning points in the story, because this is the moment where the idea of the Redhead Murders starts to solidify into something people talk about collectively, rather than a separate local cases. But even inside that meeting, investigators were careful about how they described what they were looking at. They were comparing possible links. They were not publicly declaring that a single serial killer definitely existed. That distinction matters. The similarities were strong enough to justify cooperation between agencies and involvement from the FBI, but they were never strong enough to simply settle the question. And in the years since, the term Redhead Murders has taken on a life of its own through documentaries, articles, podcasts, online discussions, and true crime coverage, even though the underlying reality has always remained far less certain. In many ways, that tension is what makes this case so compelling. The label sounds clear and definitive, but the evidence underneath it does not. To really understand why this case still gets discussed today, it helps to narrow the focus down to one victim in particular. Because among all the uncertainty, there is one case where the evidence eventually went much further than speculation. One where investigators were able to restore a name, reconstruct part of the timeline, and identify a suspect through forensic evidence rather than theory alone. That victim was Tina Marie McKenney Farmer. Tina was 21 years old and from Indiana. Around Thanksgiving in 1984, she was reported missing. Later reporting would state that she had last been known to be traveling with a truck driver and was believed to be heading towards Kentucky. After that, her family lost track of her completely. Then, on New Year's Day 1985, roughly 5 weeks after she disappeared, the body of an unidentified young woman was discovered down an embankment near Interstate 75 in Campbell County, Tennessee, close to Jellicoe. She had been wrapped in a blanket and left beside the southbound lanes of the highway. And unfortunately, the circumstances immediately resembled the same pattern investigators were already becoming concerned about. A young woman near a major interstate, left in a location that thousands of people would pass without even realizing what was there just beyond the roadside. But for years, nobody could tell investigators who she was. In official records, she remained the Campbell County Jane Doe, and although her case would later become associated with the Redhead Murders label, that still did nothing to restore her identity or explain what had happened to her. That part took decades. In 2018, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation revisited the case and re-examined evidence that had been preserved from the original investigation. Among the material retained were post-mortem fingerprints taken from the unidentified victim years earlier. Investigators compared those prints against an older fingerprint card connected to Tina Farmer. This time, the comparison produced a match. After more than 30 years, the Jane Doe found beside Interstate 75 was officially identified as Tina Marie McKenney Farmer. And that changes the story in a very important way. Because once investigators were finally able to put a name to the victim, the case stopped being just another unidentified homicide sitting inside a possible pattern. Tina now had a confirmed timeline, a missing person history, and a clearer investigative starting point that directly connected her disappearances to the Campbell County homicide. And once Tina was identified, the investigation moved into a completely different phase. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation still had physical evidence preserved from the original crime scene, including clothing and the blanket her body had been wrapped in. By that point, forensic science had advanced significantly from where it had been in the mid-1980s. So, investigators decided to test the evidence again using updated DNA analysis. This time, the result gave them something they had never had before. The DNA profile recovered from the evidence was strong enough to be entered into CODIS, the national database used by law enforcement to compare DNA profiles across investigations. And when the search came back, it pointed investigators toward a man named Jerry Leon Jones. Jones was a Tennessee truck driver, and importantly, he was not unknown to law enforcement. His DNA was already in the system because of a violent attack from the mid-1980s involving another woman named Linda Shack, who was reported to have reddish hair. According to reporting and later case summaries, Jones picked up Shack while she was traveling, assaulted her, attempted to strangle her, and left her near Interstate 40 in Tennessee. Unlike Tina, Shack survived the attack and later testified against him. In 1987, Jones was convicted on charges including kidnapping and attempted murder and was sent to prison. So by the time investigators connected his DNA to Tina Farmer's case decades later, they were not dealing with a random unknown profile appearing out of nowhere. They were looking at a convicted offender with a documented history of violence against a woman with reddish hair near a Tennessee interstate during the same general period. And that is one of the reasons Tina's case stands apart from many of the others grouped under the Redhead Murders label. Because here, investigators had more than similarities or theories. They had forensic evidence linking a named suspect to the homicide. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation publicly identified Jones as the suspect in Tina Farmer's killing based on the DNA evidence and the surrounding investigative context. And after that, Campbell County authorities presented the evidence to a grand jury. The grand jury's conclusion was direct. According to officials, if Jones had still been alive, they would have indicted him for first-degree murder in Tina's death. But by then, Jones was already dead. He had died in prison in December 2015 while serving his sentence for the attack on Linda Shark. And because of that, Tina Farmer's case never went to trial. No prosecution presented the evidence before a jury, and no defense team challenged the forensic findings in court. No verdict was ever formally reached, which leaves the case in a legally unusual position. There is strong evidence. There is a named suspect connected through DNA. There is even a public statement from a grand jury indicating that charges would likely have followed had the suspect still been alive. And this is the point where the larger questions surrounding the Redhead Murders starts to return. Because with Tina Farmer's case, investigators eventually arrived at something concrete. There was a named suspect, forensic evidence, and a grand jury statement indicating that charges would likely have been pursued had the suspect still been alive. But once you step outside of Tina's case, the picture becomes much less certain again. There are other victims associated with the Redhead Murders label who appear to share some of the same characteristics. Young women with red or urban hair whose bodies were left near highways or major roads in similar time periods stretching across multiple states. So, on the surface, the overlap is difficult to ignore, but similarities is not the same thing as proof. And that is really where the debate had remained for decades. Investigators, journalists, and researchers have all wrestled with the same underlying question. How many of these women were actually killed by the same person? And how many cases only appear connected because they share certain broad details? Even now, there is no universally accepted victim list. Some sources identify only a small number of cases as likely connected, while others expand the number much further. And over time, some murders that were once discussed confidently as part of the cluster have later been reconsidered more cautiously as additional evidence, identifications, and forensic work emerged. That process has continued in recent years as more unidentified victims connected to these discussions were finally named through DNA and genealogical research. Cases involving women such as Elizabeth Lamothe, Tracy Walker, and Michelle Inman have gradually reshaped how people look at the wider pattern. And as identities are restored, the story becomes less about an abstract collection of cases and more about individual victims whose lives were interrupted in a very different circumstances. At the same time, the media side of the story has continued evolving as well. Over the years, another label started appearing in articles, documentaries, podcasts, and online discussions as the Bible Belt Strangler. It is a phrase built around the theory that one offender may have traveled through parts of the American Bible Belt, targeting redhead women along interstate routes. But again, that label reflects interpretation far more than legal certainty. No court has ever convicted anyone under the name Bible Belt Strangler, and no indictment has ever formally used it. It exists mainly as a media shorthand for a theory about how these cases might fit together. And then, there is another layer to the story that often gets attention online. It is the involvement of a group of Tennessee sociology students who began researching the Redhead Murders as part of a school project. The students examined timelines, reviewed publicly available case material, and tried to identify possible links between the victims and locations. Their work helped bring renewed public attention to several of the cases around the same general period that Tina Farmer was identified and Jerry Leon Jones was linked through DNA evidence. Some articles and documentaries present that storyline almost as if the students solved the case themselves. It makes for a compelling headline, especially in the age of internet true crime. But when you look carefully at the actual sequence of events, the reality is more grounded than that. The students contributed attention, organization, and renewed interest in the broader pattern. The decisive forensic developments, the fingerprint identification, the DNA match through Cody's, and the grand jury review ultimately came through official investigative and forensic work carried out by the law enforcement agencies. Their theory that a single offender may have been responsible for several of the victims is certainly interesting, and it helped keep attention on cases that might otherwise have faded further into the background. But it's still important to separate interpretation from official conclusion. The idea that all of these murders were committed by one person remains a theory rather than an established finding from law enforcement. And honestly, if you have stayed with the story this far, you're probably the kind of person who does not need every case wrapped up into a clean, satisfying ending just to make it easier to process. Because sometimes the truth is less comfortable than that. Sometimes the evidence takes you part of the way and then simply stops. And that is really where the story leaves us. Our hearts go out to the families and loved ones affected. Please like, share, and subscribe to Criminal Cadence. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.